Hi everyone, I'm going to go through the first 2 pages of this 3-page assignment here. So just for the sake of time, I already put in the input values for this warm-up problem here. If you want to pause the video now and do that now. So in this next part of the chapter, it's going to be super important to always keep in mind the graph of sine and cos. Sine starts on the origin, goes up, cosine starts at the maximum, goes down, negative cosine would be at the minimum going up, and so on. So what I'm going to do now is take these ordered pairs that I got by plugging in these t values starting at 0. So 0, 3 is right here. That's my first spot. 3, 0 is right here. That's the second spot. 0, negative 3 is the third. Then negative 3, 0. And then back to 0, 3 again as the fifth. So what ends up happening here is we get a circle. This is similar to the parametric problems we did a couple weeks ago, where we end up with a nice little circle. And let's take a look at the follow-ups here so you can kind of get a sense of where we're going to be headed with circles and circular motion with parametrics. So where did the graph start at times t equals 0? That started right here. So that would be at 0, 3. Did the graph go clockwise or counterclockwise? Well, it started here, then it went here, so it's going this way. That is the way that a clock goes, so the answer to this is clockwise. Think about the y components. So the y components, so the y values of the ordered pairs, was the start point at min, max, or cross. So the start point is right here. In terms of the y values, they go from negative 3 to 3. The y values, that was at a maximum. And then we started here, went here, so went to 0. That's a mid, so that's a cross, we'll say. And then it went down to the minimum. So it went max, cross, min, then it's going to go cross, and then max, and it's going to continue that pattern for all time. So what kind of function creates a pattern that starts at a max, goes to cross, then to min, and to cross, and so on? Well, that would be the cosine function, right? Cosine starts at a maximum, cross, min, cross, max, and so on. So the answer to this is cosine, and that makes a lot of sense because our y value had cosine in it, so that matches up. The y component, or the x components, is going to be a little different here. So in terms of x, going left and right across here, this was the start point. In terms of the x values, the highest x value is there, the lowest x value is there. So this point right here was 0. That's a middle x value. So this actually started at a cross. And then since it went this way, it went to the maximum next. So cross, max. Then back here, which would have been 0, so cross. And then a minimum value of negative 3. So the type of function that goes cross, max, cross, min would be a sine function, which matches up with this. So this idea of having a specific order that they travel in and thinking about the vertical points as different than the horizontal points is going to be essential as we go into some example problems. On this next page, I put in sine of x and cosine of x. Those aren't problems. That's just reminding you what the graphs look like. So here's a couple of problems done out. Determine the equation with circle sin at the origin. So that would be right here, starting at 4, 0, and going clockwise. So if it goes clockwise, it would go this way to 0, negative 4 is the second spot. And it would go around in a circle like this. Okay, so now we're going to create the equation of these two different x and y components. For the x component, we want to think about, in terms of the x values, the first x value we have, is it a max, cross, or a min? Well, think to yourself, what is the highest x value that we could get? The highest x value we can get on the circle is an x value of 4. So it actually starts at the maximum possible x value. That means that this is going to be a cosine function, since cosine starts at the maximum. It then goes to a cross, then the minimum, and so on. So it's going to be cosine of x, and the radius is 4. We would multiply 4 times cosine of t in order to get those values. You can plug in 0, pi over 2, and so on into these to see that you do end up getting the right x values. Now the heights, so the vertical components. The start point is here. It's always important to think about where that start point is. Since this is the start point, in terms of the y values going up and down, this is in the middle of the possible y values. That means it's going to be a sine graph. Now in order to know if it's a negative sign or a positive sign, we want to think about, does it go to the minimum or the maximum next? Since it goes clockwise, it goes this way. This is the next point, critical point that it reaches. That's a minimum value. That's -4. So it is not this function. It's actually a function that's looking like this, going down instead. So that is going to be -4 sine of t. And those are our parametric equations for that problem. All right, now we're going to look at one that has a center that is not at the origin, at 2, 5. So that's right there, starting at point 2, 8. So extend this graph a little bit. It's going to be starting there. I'm going to put a little S for start. Because that is 3 away, that means it is going to have a radius of 3. And it goes counterclockwise. So this time it's going to go that way. So this is going to be the next point. And then 3 below here, 3 over here. So it's going to go around like that in this direction. So let's get another set of possible x values and y values. Okay, x values first. This x value, so going from here to here, the largest possible x value is right here at 5. The lowest one is at -1. The center is at 2. So this is going to have a midline at 2, and it's going to go up 3, then back to 2, then back down to -1, so 3 below 2. This is going to be centered at the x value of 2 as kind of the baseline. So start at 2, and this start point, think to yourself, is that a maximum, a minimum, or is it the middle possible x value? The answer is it's the middle, because the largest is 5, the lowest is -1, the middle is 2. So that means it's going to be a sine function. And the radius of 3 means our equation is 2 plus 3 sine t. Okay, so perhaps think about the pattern here. We had the center x value plus the radius times sine or cosine of t, and it's going to be something similar for the y. The mid y value is 5, so it's going to be 5 and then plus or minus something to oscillate it between those values. Now, as far as the y values go, it starts right here. That is the highest possible y value. If it starts at the highest possible y value, that is going to be a cosine function. So the 5 plus 3 cosine t will get you that function. You can plug in points just to make sure these all work. Let's just make sure this sine of t is positive there. So if we start here and then go this way, looks like we actually end up going to a minimum next. So this goes mid, then min. So this should actually be minus, because you're not going to the highest x value first, going counterclockwise to a minimum. Okay, general rule. If we think about what we did up here, x is going to be equal to the x value of the center, so it's going to be at h. And it's either going to be plus or minus, depending on it. And then it's going to be r. That r always ends up being the value multiplied. It's the amplitude for each of the x and y. And then times either sine or cos. And to determine if it's sine or cos, you just have to think about, am I starting at the maximum, the middle, and so on. And then of bt. Now this b value we'll worry about tomorrow. That's not part of today's lesson. But the radius and the center are both here and here. The y value will be very similar. It'll be k plus or minus, that's the middle k value, r times sine or cos, depending on where it starts. Same thing times bt, and that's the equation. The b will be something, but for today's lesson you can just treat it as one. I hope that made sense, and good luck.